So it is our 3 modes in today's session. So again, general vision and viewpoint, cultural context, which we did say very, very similar to one another, and then literary genre, which we classified as that outlier question, okay? We went through very much the new structure, but we will be using that again today when we start looking at our modes in depth and answering questions in depth, and our marking scheme, our new marking scheme that we spoke about as well. And again, to remind ourselves, linking language, massive plus, topic sentences, TS for topic sentences, optics, hooks, all of these things that we spoke about last week. We remind ourselves of how significant they are going forward. So we have a couple of little final pointers just to look at before we move on to our second session properly. On page 28, which is where we finished up in the comparative notes last week, we spoke about this self-test. So we refer to our narrative writing section in the paper 1 notes. A narrative is a description of a sequence of events where conflict plays a central role. The 2 types of narrative structure are first person and third person narrator. So that's our, that's a narrative structure, is linear and non-linear. So those are our plot lines. A narrator, on the other hand, that's the second part there, is our first and third person narrator. Excuse me, apologies there. So that's the first and third person narrator. When we think about our films, or our visual text as we refer to it as well, we think about the ideas behind that and maybe not having a narrator. So then we think about mise en scène and everything in the shot, everything in the framing of the angle, which again in today's session through literary genre we'll have a good strong look at. Okay, in terms of CSPT there, all narratives must have character, setting, plot and theme. How we judge a character is through tada, which you can see on page 28 there, thoughts, action, dialogue and appearance. Setting is there. Setting we referred to last week as exposition. The plot, at the heart of which conflict, there is a conflict, and in which tension plays a central role. You could change that up a little bit and say that in which there is a character and then there is a theme that plays a central role. You could look at it in that regard either, and that leads on to the theme there, which are the main ideas explored and expressed within the narrative. All right. On top of page 29, which is where we finished off last week's session. So when we are reading or viewing the stories in your comparative texts, think about how a writer, director or playwright or creator, that's just all good jargon there, it's all good vernacular, guys, to be using when we are looking at our comparative. So all the language at the top of page 29 there, really, really useful. We look at how they introduce and develop characters. So how does the creator allow us to relate to a character? How do they create and describe a setting? What impact does this have on the character's attitudes and behaviour? How do they move the plot forward? So how successful is the creator at sustaining your interest in the narrative? And finally, how do they challenge the reader to question the ideas explored in the text? What ideas or issues are explored? How are the issues resolved, and what does this reveal about the attitudes? Okay, if we take our middle board here now, a new middle board, brand new middle board for today's session, if we take all of that on board and we recognize, right, well, these are the things that we're ultimately looking for from our creators, from our playwrights, directors and authors, we have a little look going back to our very kind of rudimental plot line. If you've spent time on the Shakespearean sessions this year, you'll know that we have an 8-point plot line for the Shakespearean text. This is very much a 4-point plot line, so far more rudimental, far more basic, but very much serves our purpose for what we need it for with regards to the comparative. Here you can see at the top of the board, I have just general vision, viewpoint and cultural context at the minute, and nonetheless literary genre, you can use this plot line for that mode as well. Just at the minute it's easier because for you guys is what I would ask you to do, and again this is totally up to you guys, but I would turn our page landscape mode. I would take this down again, you'll be familiar with this because I would have asked you to do the same with regards to our Shakespeare studies as well. Turn our page landscape mode, map out this plot line. So this is a linear plot line. You can see it's broken up into our main areas yet again. This goes all the way back to last week's session about about our 4 or 5 or 6 key moments per text. So in that regard, you can see exposition, conflict, climax, and resolution. That's our natural linear plot line, and within each area there you can see play, novel, film, play, novel, film, etc., etc. Now, why do we have this on the board? Why am I asking you to write this out in your landscape mode? Is because once you do that, these text boxes obviously will be substantially bigger than they are here, far more usable than I have them here as well. What I would encourage you to do is ask yourself a couple of questions. So say, for example, the exposition. Is the exposition of my respective text, is it interesting? Are they boring? You know, is it mundane? Is it very rudimental? Is it basic, or is it unique? The conflict, like we spoke about last week as well, you ask yourselves, where does the conflict come from? Is it internal, so in the person themselves, their own insecurities in their own mind? Is it external? So is it with other people? Is it societal values? Is it race, gender, those kind of things? Power? What kind of climax does that build to, and what is the climax and where it exists within the text? And then our resolution, I'll come back to climax now in a moment. Resolution, we asked ourselves before, is there a sense of finality? Is there a sense of closure to be associated with the text, okay? And what I would ask you to do, either now, if you're pausing the video and you're kind of you're working off kind of the video and kind of your revision at the one time. In the sense, obviously I know the videos are there to be revised and you are using it for revision, in the sense that what I mean is, are you spending kind of an hour and a half to 2 hours on the topic right now, in which case you can pause, rewind, start again, pause, you know, continue on. If that's the case, great. I'd ask you to kind of fill in 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 elements, 2 or 3 areas and moments that exist within your respective texts. So 2 or 3 things to say about the exposition from your play, 2 or 3 things to say about your exposition from the novel, and then the film. Same way with conflict. What types of conflict exist within the play? Is there 2 or 3 elements that you can draw from? Same with our novel, same with our film. And continue on with the climax. Is there one particular climax within your play? Is there 2 potential significant peak moments of tension? Is there 1 or 2 in the novel, 1 or 2 in the film? And then the resolution, you're almost asking yourself these questions. Is there a sense of finality? Is there a sense of closure? Now, why am I asking you to do this? It's not in the notes, so why am I asking you to do this in terms of a revision process? Well, because as discussed, these are our 4 main areas of our text. You cannot answer a general vision and viewpoint question, or indeed a cultural context question, without knowing beginning, middle, and end. So, bare minimum, we have to know these 4 key moments per text for these 2 answers. And the reason being then is, if we have 2 or 3 elements that we can draw from per text, per moment, well then we don't need anything else from our texts, okay? So yes, you could say, okay, well we need our quotes maybe, we're going to add in additional quotes, for example, absolutely. We might need characterization. I would argue characterization, setting, description, all of that will fall under this little revision plan as well, okay? So what have you to say about the conflict that exists in your novel? Have you got 1 or 2 or 3 things that exist there? What will ultimately happen? You know, you could fill in this, fill in this grid, climax. What have you got to say about the climax moments or the peak moments of tension in the film? What do you feel about the resolution in your play, novel, or film? The ultimate goal is, and ultimately what you will find out will happen, is that you will have, in terms of, in terms of your revision, you'll have it all mapped out in front of you here with relative ease. So you are simply taking these by themselves. You're taking the play, the novel, the film by itself. And yet, at the end of the process, you'll have it all mapped out and you'll be able to say, oh yeah, you know what, that's very, very similar to there. And actually the novel is very similar to the film there as well. You know what, in my resolution, the play and the novel and the film are actually very similar, etc., etc. All right? This is something that we have started to implement over the last 4 or 5 years here in the Academy. I'll show you some of the questions that also are contained at the end of the notes here as well. But it's definitely something that students have come up to us at the end of both 5th year and 6th year and have said, yeah, you know what, I found that super useful. I can really map out exactly what it is that we need to talk about and what it is I need to kind of focus on when I'm talking about moments within my play, novel and film. Alright? As I said, general vision, viewpoint and cultural context, I would argue that once you fill this in for one of these, it is going to be appropriate then for the other mode. So that's the beauty of these two, taking them together. Linear plot, stick to kind of the linear plot in terms of where you put from a chronological standpoint, where you put things in. And it's always good to ask ourselves questions about these areas as well, because again, that'll allow us to, I suppose, put pen to paper with relative ease. All right? It's a great little revision tool, guys. I'd encourage you to take a little screenshot of it there, and just so that you know whether if you're not filling it in now, or you're not certainly writing it out in your copy now, fine. But I would encourage you to do that at some time in your studies. Okay. If we jump back, we're about 2 minutes away now from really getting into our modes and starting off looking at them in great detail. We will introduce a couple of pauses in today's video to allow you to kind of fill in some of the questions, fill in some of the gaps as well with regards to our text. Top of page 30, however, if we have a little look at our comparative study checklist. So, we will always read the question carefully before you begin. Always answer the question that's being asked, so LOQ, the modal language we spoke about last week as well. Plan your answer carefully. Again, this is one of our 5 areas in our Leaving Cert that deserves a plan. So our question B on paper 1, our essay on paper 1, our single text, study poetry, and indeed our comparative. All 5 areas deserve a plan, and examiners will gravitate towards your script in a much greater fashion when those essays have a plan. Okay, so we plan our answer carefully. Are you addressing all elements? That's very easy to see from an examiner's point of view, which is great as well, you know, to be able to see that your essay is mapped out, and it's very easy to correct then. Never tell the story, which we said before. Never summarize, be summative. It's the worst thing ever that we can do. What we're using our key moments to say is like, look, this is the key moment, but, and far more importantly, what is the significance of the key moment? Why have I, you guys, the candidates, why have I elected to talk about this particular key moment? And as we said last week, it is because that key moment is representative of exactly how the text feels about wealth, about power, about race, whatever it is. It is the most representative moment that I, the candidate, can show you, the examiner. Okay? Always engage with the text, keeping the I at the heart of your answer. Always use key moments to demonstrate your points. And A, B, C, always be comparing. No matter what, always try and find the similarities and the contrasts within your text. Okay? You will be rewarded for engaging with the text. This means you should always mention what your opinion is and what you think, how your opinion changed after studying the text. It is crucial that you do this as well as just comparing the text. Okay?